Hello everyone. This video will be covering some information that will be very important to know beforehand for several videos that will come after this one. But don't worry, this information is pretty simple. In fact, this information is something that I probably should have covered much earlier, but it only occurred to me after the video about generators, so I apologize for that. So the information I'll be sharing with you in this video is that just like data types, data structures, objects, and even the classes that define objects, Python functions are objects too. And because of this, we can store them in variables and data structures and pass them in as arguments for other functions, all without immediately executing them. So how do we do that? Simple. We simply reference the function name without including the parentheses, as you can see in this example here. So here I have a function called func1, and all it does is print out the message hello. So don't mind this code and this code here. That's just for me to separate the output from the two different examples. But in this example, I have a function called func1, and it simply prints out a message hello. And right here, I simply do a quick review of how we execute functions. I'm just calling func1 so that it executes the code under its definition. And then down here, though, as you can see, I'm taking the func1 name without the parentheses, and I'm storing it into a variable called a func variable. And then I print out a func variable and I print out its type to show you that it's of the function class. And then finally, I execute func1 via a func var by attaching parentheses at the end of it. So when I execute this, here's where we call func1 itself. And then here's where we did all the assignment stuff that you see here. So we're printing out a func var, which is basically just printing out the information func1. And then we check its type, which returns the class function. So function is a class that can create function objects. And then when we execute a func var, as we do here, as you can see, it's executing the code under func1. So why would we do this? Well, there's a number of use cases. One use case involves Python generators. If you don't know anything about those yet, I recommend checking out the video I made that covers Python generators. But for those of you who do, for this example, let's say that we might have a program that dynamically runs generator functions based on certain conditions. So assigning function names to variables beforehand can help us do this. Here's our example. I've got two functions, alphafunc and numeric_func. An alphafunc goes through a list of letters, A through H, and yields them one at a time. A numeric_func will go through a range of numbers and yield each number one at a time. And since the range is set from 0 to 11, that means it's going to yield the numbers 0 through 10. And so then down here, we've got two variables. We've got gen and setting. Gen is the variable that's going to store the function name that we are going to execute. And setting is the variable that will control the condition to determine which function name is going to be stored inside of gen. So if it's alpha, then gen is going to store alphafunc. If it's num, gen is going to store numeric_func. And again, when we wanted to store function names inside of variables, we leave out the parentheses. And then here we have our for loop that's going to iterate through the generator function that we end up executing, and it's going to print out the information that's yielded into I. So it's either going to print out the letters one at a time, or it's going to print out the numbers one at a time. So first we're going to execute it with the settings set to num. So when I run it, it prints out the numbers 0 through 10. Then we're going to set it to alpha. And then it prints out the letters A through H, which is the letters in our list here. And even though we've assigned a function to a variable name, we can still pass in arguments when the function requires it. So in this example here, we've got numeric function again, but this time it takes in a single parameter and it's specified as num. Num is going to be used to specify the max for the range, and it's going to add 1 to that num in order to make sure that the number itself is included in the range. So this will yield out x all the way up to the num we specified. And then down here in our for loop, we specify gen, open up some parentheses, and then we pass in a number as the argument for our parameter here. In this case, we're passing in the number 10. And then it's going to print out each I that's yielded from the numeric function. So when I run this, it prints out 0 through 10. And just to show something a little bit different, I'm going to change it to 15. And it prints out 0 to 15. Another example is passing in functions as arguments into other functions. This can be useful for providing some status or debugging information, or to be used to add extra functionality to another function or even an object. So in this example here, we've got two functions, and they just have a bunch of simple print statements here, but you can basically put whatever you want in them. The first one is func, and all it says is this function did some things. This is our main function, the one we would typically execute. Then we have func wrapper. This takes in a single parameter, func name, and as the name implies, this parameter should be the name of a function. And inside of it, it's going to first print out a message, then it's going to execute the function it was provided, and then it's going to print out another message. And then down here, we're calling the func wrapper function, and we're passing in func as its argument. So when we run it, we should first see do some stuff before the function, then we'll see this stuff printed out, and then we'll see the message do some stuff after the function. See? Do some stuff before the function, then the function itself, and then do some stuff after the function. One last example. We can even assign a function name with another function definition. So in this code example right here, I have two functions, func1 and func2. Func1 just says hello, and func2 just says bye. And then down here, I call func1 to demonstrate its initial definition. And then I reassign the func1 name with the func2 name, and then I call func1 again. So when I run this code, what's going to happen is it's going to print out hello first, but then after the reassignment, it's going to print out bye because the func1 name has been reassigned to the func2 name, so it's going to execute func2's functionality. So when I run this, we get hello, and then we get bye. So why would we do this? There's one really good applicable scenario for this, and that's unit testing, which is the process of testing the individual components of the software to make sure they are working correctly. Sometimes these components will be trying to call other components, like other functions, that we may not need to actually run for that specific unit test. So just before running the unit test of a component, we could reassign any function names that may be called upon with new definitions during the testing. There are, of course, Python modules that make it easier for us to do this while minimizing potential errors in the process, but this is essentially what that is. And so yeah, like everything else in Python, functions are basically objects. But that's about it for this topic. So I hope you've enjoyed this video and found it helpful, and if you did, then please hit the like button and leave a comment below to let me know what you think. And if you want to see more, head on over to Wayfair Coding Academy channel to check out my other content. And while you're there, subscribe to the channel to stay up to date on new stuff as it comes out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.